Welcome, data enthusiasts. We are Zuma, the recruitment agency focused 100% on data tech professionals in and around the Berlin region. And today, this is our podcast, Data for Good, connecting you with all things data. And I'm also pleased today to be joined by Mike Kamysz. Mike is Principal Data Engineer and lead of the data engineering team at the Data Institute. Welcome, Mike. How's it going today?
Thank you very much, Joseph. I'm super happy to be here.
Great, brilliant. I'll get right into it. Today's topic, data governance, very topical this year. And no doubt as a data professional, it's an ever-present concern of yours. So data governance, hit me with it. What is data governance and why is it relevant to you?
I think it's for us as an agency that consults clients across, for us, it's three different pillars that are important in any data project. It's always the processes of a company, it's always the people, and it's the technical architecture. And I think data governance is one of these things that really covers the whole spectrum of these three pillars. Because I think if you want to break it down to a very simple one sentence answer, it's everything that you do to make your data secure, to make it accessible, and to make it accurate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Process, people, architecture, or process, people, and technology. That just goes to show that it has such a broad impact on businesses. And perhaps businesses don't fully recognize it, but you do as a data professional. So in what case or when is data governance relevant to business needs? What do businesses need to be aware of in this case?
I think the first thing that a business needs to recognize is that data governance is not an optional thing. It's something that every company requires, and it's also already something that pretty much every company does in some way or form, but most of the times not sufficiently, I would say. And I think what most companies will feel at some point is the symptoms of a lack of data governance.
Okay. I have a quick question on that then. The lack of sufficiency that you mentioned, do you typically see this more with startups or smaller businesses as opposed to corporates?
That's an interesting question. I think both come with very different challenges, I would say. Because in a startup, obviously, the speed with which the company changes often leads to shortcuts taken in especially the processes part or the documentation part at some point. So this will lead over time to problems. And then for established corporations, I think it's just the sheer amount of complexity that brings different challenges. So you can really see that I think data governance is an important topic that needs working on across the whole spectrum of companies. And then also with the way that tools have developed in the past, I think what you can really see is that working with data and producing data and transforming data got way easier in the last couple of years. And because of that, the need for data governance is skyrocketing, right? Because there are many more people now involved with working with data in every company. Also people who don't come necessarily from a super deep technical background. So they might just not know things as well as people did in the past. And because of that, I think it's becoming more and more important.
The capability coming from ease of access and volume and velocity of data is fantastic for organizations large and small, but what are the risks, to put it in really practical terms, for maybe a business leader with who started their business 3 years ago, and they're really starting to enjoy the power of data. What are the risks that they need to be aware of that data governance addresses?
I think the movement to become more data driven, many decision makers in businesses are going down that road because they like the premise of not having to rely on their gut feel anymore, but have numbers that back up their decision-making processes. And if your organization lacks data governance, I think you can really, really destroy these upsides of working with data again, because you will see, I don't know, 2 dashboards that show the same metric, but the metric shows a different number because definitions across departments are not unified, for example, or certain transformations are applied on one side but not on the other. So people are not on the same side. And if you just look at the number, you would think that it should tell you the same things. And then also, so this is a very clear business risk, I think. And then on the other side, you also have just cost topics, for example, because many companies move to the cloud, and the cloud's whole premise is that you scale and grow with your data demands, for example, and that it's cheap to do your data products. But a lack of data governance again leads to redundancy in the way that you transform and depict your data, and this can then have very significant hidden costs that you're not even aware of. So again, this benefit could go out of the window. But I think it's really across the board where it's really, really dangerous.
In summary, I take accuracy in reporting and then costing and hidden costs associated. There are other topics, and perhaps you're going to go into them already today, but I think of the cybersecurity risk, bias in data. What are your thoughts on those two to begin with, and how data governance addresses those?
Yeah, I think particularly in Europe, of course, GDPR is a big topic. So being aware of what sensitive data and critical data you have and what you do to it is incredibly important for companies. And it's not only being aware of the data that you have, but also your consumers or your customers might have a right that their data gets deleted from your systems, for example, right? So you also have to have technical measures in place that addresses these consumers' rights. So this is certainly a very, very important topic that data governance also touches upon. And then in general, you said it that the security aspect is not only internal versus external individuals getting access to data, but it also needs to not only external individuals getting access to your data, but of course also internally that the right people get access to the data that you have. So you might have different, I don't know, sales locations where sales manager A is not allowed to see the numbers of sales manager B and stuff like that. This is, of course, also something that a data governance framework touches upon.
Okay, so your role as a principal data engineer and data engineering lead, would you typically, you work for a consultancy, so would you typically go into businesses and as part of a complete data package, your role, amongst other tasks, would involve implementing a data governance strategy?
I don't do it on my own, thankfully. We also have a consulting arm. So I'm the technical representative of the Data Institute, and then we also have a consulting arm that are more on the business side of things and strategy side of things. And the data governance or data governance projects would be a very clear example for a project that we tackle hand in hand, basically. So certainly,
with the business stakeholders.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So when you go to implement a data governance strategy with a client, and this is good for any business to be aware of, what topics or what areas need to be included in that data governance strategy?
So I think the first step to take is really understanding the status quo. And that's not only because we typically come in as externals with little knowledge on how the company works internally, but I think it's also always a valuable exercise to do, even for the company itself, if you would do it without any external consultants. Because I am 100% certain that there are very few companies out there having a true grasp on the whole data governance topic and how they handle it at the moment. So usually what you do is document the status quo, and it covers things like the data that is available already, the pipelines that you have in place, so which transformation steps does your data go through, which roles do you have inside of your company that interact with the data. So is it data engineers, which business analysts get access to the data, where's the data produced, in which systems, and how does it flow from there? So this entire thing needs to be done upfront. And then usually you will quite quickly notice the shortcomings that you will have. And sometimes they are less drastic, but there's also certainly examples that are quite in need of change.
Okay, so these are the first steps then in deploying a data governance strategy. You would then seek to kind of gather requirements, you'd seek to understand, you'd document the status quo, and that includes looking or reviewing pipelines, roles, and access, for example. What happens next? I hope I'm not giving away the secret sauce here of how you
No,
go about your work.
I don't think so. I would say the next step would be securing buy-in from someone quite high up the food chain, because data governance, we touched upon it a bit already. It's a topic that concerns the entire company. It's not only a topic that concerns the technical nerds, but also everyone in every facility that does something with data. So you should really start top down and secure some form of executive sponsorship. And then typically in this round, you would set out with like as in every strategy, basically, like the why, the who, and the what, basically. So why do we do it? Who is involved in this whole process? And with which tools do we do it with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. So get buy-in from leadership, and leadership would be hugely influential across all other stakeholders for you to be able to continue implementing that strategy. What's next?
I think then you can switch it up and start bottom up, because then, when you get into the nitty-gritty details of data governance, it is really, really important to have people data literate. So they need to understand why it's important to pay attention to these things and where data governance even happens, because sometimes it can be quite an abstract topic. So they need to understand their own role, and I think like data literacy trainings are a good way to continue the process and facilitate this awareness in the company.
So this is education and training from bottom up.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, fantastic. Next.
Start small, maybe, as with every transformation project. I think it's of little to no use to just try to build a new supercar and sit people inside of it without them being able to drive it at all. So usually there is good things in every company already. take them out, start with them, and then grow them into something.
Give me an example, put that into context for me. I'm thinking about data engineers who are seeking to implement data governance or simply managing data governance tasks.
It can start very small,
visualize.
really, like, yeah. So it can start really small, actually, with just having proper documentation in place. For example, making sure that the data products that you deliver are really properly documented, because I think every company at some point struggles with this part. And especially companies that are not super data driven already, I think there you will quite often find situations where you have this one person that is essential for all data things to work. And if there's this bus test thingy, have you heard of it? So if a person
Bus test.
If a person gets hit by the bus tomorrow, is the company still functioning properly? I like to spin it in a more optimistic way. So let's say that person wins the lottery and heads off to some faraway island and is not reachable anymore.
Yeah, I like
you
that.
shouldn't have that. You shouldn't have that for sure. So starting small, documenting everything, making sure that knowledge is shared across many shoulders. I think these are the small steps that always need to happen first.
Fantastic. Start small, gain wins, use the literacy and education, and then start to build upon that. Are there any subsequent stages?
What's important, I think, for every strategy, and here it's also, again, nothing special for data governance, but it is you need to measure how well you are doing to really make sure that you stay on track. So I think we can touch across the different roles in a data governance framework maybe in a bit to make it more clear where it happens and who is responsible and accountable for different parts of this whole journey.
Okay.
But quite early on in this process, you should already set out to define some measures that you continuously have a look at to make sure that you are still on the right track. And it's quite difficult to find the right measures, to be honest, because data governance will never be a topic that directly affects your bottom line, probably.
But it could land you in some GDPR trouble if you're not adhering to that. So it could well be a major and critical cost saving.
That is true.
And then also, although it doesn't affect the bottom or the top line, if the data isn't accurate, then teams are going to start to, mass confusion could ensue. Sure. Okay, cool. So it's way more than just can we see revenue generation from it? This is a critical business need. Okay, so you were going to go into it in talking about measuring and the different roles. So who would be the key players and who would be the stakeholders impacted?
So in terms of players, I think you can really differentiate between the big G, and the G is governance in this picture, and the little G, with the big G being the high level strategic decisions that have to be made, and the little G being the daily operations and implementation of the framework that you set out to do. And I think with the high level strategic part, what we usually recommend our clients to build is some form of data governance board or data governance office that really serves as a central entity and combines stakeholders from various fields within the organization. So it's really maybe a data architect to bring the technical perspective. It's managers from different departments. Ideally, it's a company that already employs a chief data officer, so he or she certainly has a seat on this board. And then it can be many people. We have clients who have really executive leadership in this data governance board as well, because they want to put a lot of importance on this topic. And then it can go all the way down to individual business analysts, just to switch up the perspective and bring some of the daily concerns or daily suggestion into the sport as well. And
Okay.
yeah, these people would be the ones that really discuss the processes and the standards and policies that they want to set. And because of that, it's quite important to have a diverse field of people partaking in this activity, because you don't want to do stuff that is just not feasible in real life, right?
Yeah. Okay. So with that then, what would be the different roles you'd see in a data governance framework?
So the data governance board as the overall entity, and then below that for the daily implementation, typically you would find two terms I think are thrown around quite often, which is the stewards and the custodians.
Yeah.
With the stewards being the more business-minded folks, so they could be the data users or the data producers that generate the data and that work with it directly. And the custodians are the more technical folks that make sure that there's also a technical control, technical configurations, and technical design choices that make sure that the standards and policies that were set are upheld, basically.
Seldom do I see a position of data steward. Very occasionally, I see these positions advertised. Do you think it's critical that large organizations have assigned data stewards that are their role is 100% data stewarding?
I haven't encountered a situation myself where I would say there is the need for a full-time data steward. More often than not, you see it as an additional responsibility for people that are becoming more data driven in their department, for example. Or the custodian could also be a data engineer that works on a specific data product.
Might you see operational managers like head of sales being a data steward as well, given that they would be presiding over lots of reporting?
I think so, yeah. They need to bring some form of data literacy, but hopefully as a head of in 2024 almost, you bring that as part of your skill set. And then for sure, because I think it's quite important that the stewards bring a very, very strong business perspective into this whole data governance topic as well, because they are the ones defining what the metric is supposed to mean. And they are the ones defining what data quality means for them. So I think it's quite important that it's people from the daily business.
Yeah, I want to talk about tooling, and it seems even more relevant now because not only is it data professionals that have a say and have some proactivity in data governance, and typically tools take education. So I wonder, what are the tools of criticality in data governance strategy?
I'm going to give you a super consulting style answer, which is the best tool is the tool that works for you. And in general, I think it's never the right approach to select a tool and then design your data governance strategy and framework around the tool, but pick your tool that supports the strategy that you set out on the best.
Interesting. Okay. This is all assuming that the tool does the job and upholds the standards that you spoke about earlier. Okay. All right. Well, with that then, are there best practices, or what does best practice look like in data governance? Especially, again, given the array of stakeholders that it impacts.
That's a very difficult question because I think it depends super heavily on the company that you are looking at. But maybe we can switch the perspective a bit and we talk about what are definite don't do's that you have in this field. Because I think, for example, like it's falling back to tooling again a bit, but there are certain tools that just don't allow you to do great data governance. For example, if you are forced to do documentation outside of the tool that you are working with on a daily basis, like the typical example being people documenting code on Confluence, for example, it can work, but I assure you at some point it's going to lag behind because there is a minor change pushed here and someone forgets to update the Confluence documentation on it because there's nothing that prevents you from pushing a change in code without updating a Confluence page first, right? So this lack of mechanism to prevent you from doing bad practices will lead to a drift in straying from good data governance at some point. So you need to have tools in place that allow you to do good data governance. And this, for example, is documentation in code. Stuff like DBT, for example, does quite well with this already because you can describe your models in the same code that you use to define what your models are. So you don't need to touch two systems, for example. This is quite nice. Then DBT itself, again, is great because you can version your code. And for too long, I think companies still used tools that didn't allow them to version their pipelines. And this, again, will just lead to problems down the line because there is no transparency into what changed from the latest release or stuff like that. And this will cause problems. You will require some form of testing to make sure that your data quality is high. So is your data complete? Is your data in time? Is it accurate? Is it consistent across different tables that you populate from the same sources, for example? And here again, you need to have a tool that allows you to do that. So these are the things that you need to look out for, I think.
I take from that it's not a linear approach to best practice and data quality and achieving data quality, but there are some things like documentation, rigorous testing, and an example product would be DBT and version coding.
Yeah, for example.
Okay. Well, I hope that can be helpful for data engineers. That it's like the tools. It's the best fit for the role. Mike. Oh, sorry. If you were to add a point.
No. I think as just one person in any team, it will be quite difficult to establish the importance that data governance needs to have, or the attention that it needs to have. So just an engineer or just someone from business will likely struggle a bit to implement data governance on their own. So I think this may also be the reason why it's really difficult to pinpoint exact tooling in certain positions, because it's really just such a broad topic that has to be rolled out across the whole place.
Another topic. I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious that our work these days almost always touches AI and the massive impact on society, business, and tech that AI has had this year. What are the impacts and benefits that you see, especially given sensitivity around, issues and concerns around data bias and potential misuse? Several cases this year.
It's an interesting question, I think. So regarding the usage of AI in a company, I think you have seen a lot of examples, for example, where people carelessly paste company data into any large language models to get a quick analysis without really knowing what OpenAI or the others will use the data for. So just this lack of sensitivity where I am allowed to paste the data that my company processes. So this is certainly something that data governance should aim to address and make people aware, like which tools am I allowed to use, what could be potential dangers of pasting, I don't know, my sales report into ChatGPT to get a trend summary or something like this. Then, of course, if the company themselves want to use AI, data governance can be a quite important factor in making sure that the data quality is high enough to actually be able to do valuable stuff with any artificial intelligence product that they build upon, because, you know, the many engineers' favorite sentence, shit in, shit out, that with bad data, you will never generate great results, no matter how intelligent your algorithms are. And data quality, of course, is one of the outcomes of a proper data governance in a company. So having it in place to then facilitate use cases where AI is employed, certainly something that is quite interesting.
I'm also thinking about verifying how, you know, whether we should and how to verify any use of AI in implementing data governance or in implementing data systems. You know, it seems now that we jump to AI as the answer because it's quick and it's easy, and on many occasions it's proved to be inaccurate and it's caused businesses a lot of trouble. So I wonder what kind of verification process we should be able to go through in using AI, because I'd imagine that falls under the remit of data governance.
Yeah, I would think this is one of the prime examples that the data governance board would discuss in their sessions and set out a company-wide policy for. And again, it's difficult to say, like I don't think there is a clear solution to this or a clear recommendation that can apply to every company, because again, it depends really heavily on how you use AI and what your business model is and what you do, to say which role you should give it in your company.
Mike, this has been fantastic. I've taken notes throughout, and I think there's some really good takeaways for engineers and for business managers and for data users alike. So you've been really, really clear and concise. I really appreciate that today.
Lovely. That was fun. Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, great. Cheers, Mike. And for any listeners or viewers, I implore you to reach out to Mike should you have any further data governance questions. Mike, where can people reach out to you for more info?
On LinkedIn mainly, or on our company website, which would be datainstitute.io.
Sweet, brilliant. Okay, thanks very much, and see you all next time.